Well, a little earlier, I spoke via the internet to the former Olympic rower James Cracknell and the multi-gold medal-winning Paralympian Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson. I asked James Cracknell if he was surprised by the decision.
I'd like to say yes, but sadly no. I think it's all too predictable that the IC have tried to look strong by referring it to the governing bodies of the individual sports to make the final decision. But I think deep down they know the individual sports haven't got the money. Individual federations, the canoeing federation, haven't got the money in case athletes who are banned take legal action. So ultimately, many sports won't take the risk of their future and allow the athletes in.
Tanni, do you agree with that assessment, or is there an argument that actually it makes sense to, rather than tarring every athlete with the same brush, to leave it to the individual federations?
I just think, with 12 days to go before the start of the Olympics, James is right. They either don't have the money or they don't have the time to take action. Most of the athletes will already be in Rio. They'll be moving into the village fairly soon. So it just pushes it back to a decision post-Rio. And, I just kind of wonder when, the IOC is going to take a really hard stance on athletes who have failed tests.
Well, James, with just 12 days to go until Rio, inevitably, does it taint the whole Olympics, this?
It would taint it if Russian athletes were allowed to compete. If you think the IAAF first banned Russian athletes, that's the athletics, the Track and Field Federation, first banned the Russian athletes in November. And the IOC have then pushed it to the other sports with 12 days to go. And you can't expect them to have gone through the arbitration process to make sure they are banning the right ones, or you have a blanket ban. And it's unfair to, Russian athletes, some are going to be innocent and will suffer, but if you go back to 1980 and 84 with the boycotts, I don't think there was many Soviets who were given the option, Soviet athletes, whether they attended the Los Angeles Games. So I think they're going to have to, in order to clean this up, as they did with cycling and as they did with selection process after host cities in Salt Lake City in 2002, they're going to have to make a stand. And yes, some innocent people are going to get caught in the process, but it's got to be a ground zero approach if you're going to have any credibility in any sport, if the Russians there.
Tanni, do you think that the IOC has been bullied by Vladimir Putin?
I think there probably has been some consideration given to the politics, because as much as we'd love to say politics and sport shouldn't be connected, they invariably are. So it ends up being, what are the IOC going to do? I mean, if I had a choice, I would say any athlete who's failed a test, they shouldn't be allowed to compete at the Olympics again, because we will have, across a huge number of sports, athletes who served a ban who will be there, who've done their 2 years or whatever it is. So, what I'd do personally, you should be out of the Olympics or the Paralympics, because don't forget in all this there's been 35 positive missing samples from Paralympic sport, but also the personal coaches and the associated personnel, everyone around those athletes should be taken out of the major games, because at the minute, for a lot of athletes, it's a risk worth taking. If the most you're going to get is a 2-year ban and you'll be able to come back to the next games, it's not going to stop people doing it. Personally, I'll take it a step further. I'd criminalise the use of performance-enhancing drugs in sport, and a lot of countries have that in place. I'd like to see us do it, but I'd like to see every other nation do it as well.
James, what do you think is the remedy?
Well, I think in going back to what Tanni said about the innocent people on the Russian team, you'll think about the people that may have their moment of competing, coming forth, and then subsequently a Russian athlete being banned. And I'm sure Tanni's the same. With my Olympic medals, I couldn't guarantee where they are in the house. But if you sat down and asked me what it was like winning the medal on that day, I can tell you that memory will never go. And for any athlete that is subsequently given a medal who wasn't able to celebrate it on that day, it's changed their life commercially and emotionally forever. And individual Russian athletes, some will be clean and will never have taken anything. But if it's a state-sponsored doping program, you have to stop the state going, not just one of the 26 sports.
Do you ever look back at any events you've competed in and question some of the Russians you competed against?
Not when I was a senior athlete, because you're racing the people, and you have to trust they're innocent or until they get proven guilty. And if you line up thinking they're guilty, or they're cheating, you're psychologically going to think that they're stronger than you. So the only time, though, I did question it was I was at the Under-18 World Championships, and it was the Soviet Union then. The Soviet guy next to me had a massive beard. And I remember thinking, you're not 18.
Tanni, have you ever looked at individual races and thought there's something funny going on there?
I don't think I've experienced it, but until very recently, sort of doping in Paralympic sport was very minor. I mean, because actually the drugs are relatively easy to buy. It's the masking agents and, having the doctors help to get you through it, which is expensive to put in. So there probably hasn't been the money in Paralympic sport, but I think that's changed in the last couple of years. And if we don't do something now, it will come into force within Paralympic sports. So, but, I've got lots of friends, as I'm sure James has, who, from other sports, who suffered that, who've had medals presented 2 years later in a sort of ceremony that is never the same. So, I've got enough friends in sport that have had their sporting careers wrecked by it. So, I don't want to see, unclean athletes being able to participate.
James Cracknell, Baroness Grey-Thompson, thank you both very much for joining me.